right? You know about that.
Only me. Woody's slapping at flies. We got all kinds of things going on here, guys.
You think I'm joking, buddy? You think I'm joking?
I didn't know it was to that degree.
It is to that degree, yes.
Yeah. Rick's monkey phobia extends to bananas. Looks like it's hot where you are, Carl.
All right, guys, we're live.
All right. So we're up on YouTube. So everybody's in. Awesome. All right. So it's nice to see everyone. I hope everyone has been having some fun and a creative summer so far. I imagine just about everybody is in the Northern Hemisphere that's watching this. If you're headed into winter, I hope it's a great creative winter too. So Woody's got the audio feedback coming, but we'll fix that.
It's already taken care of.
There we go. So we, as usual, we have most people are muted in here. Sort of the main speakers. We got Woody and Rick and Darren and David who are kind of moderating. That are unmuted. We can unmute people for questions. Probably today we're going to spend a lot of time looking at images because you all submitted some just amazing long exposure images. And we'll talk about those and have fun going through everybody's pictures. And then we'll have time at the end. We'll do a few questions. Woody, have you got anything to put out?
I don't.
Oh, one note. Next office hours is going to be on July 6th. Rick is going to be visiting. We're going to be doing some work together. And we thought we would do, finally, we've been promising it for a while. We thought we'd do that Nikon specific office hours. So if you're a non-Nikon shooter or you're not Nikon curious, just, take that one off and do a long 4th of July weekend. But July 6th, 10 a.m., we're going to talk Nikon. So we'll get that sign up and you can put in your questions and we'll just devote an hour to sort of
be as specific as you want.
There you go. Yeah. Because I feel as if at the end of every office hour, we still have 20 questions about Nikon that we kind of push to the end because, there's plenty of people in here that are not Nikon shooters and we don't want to monopolize it with Nikon. So, and also I got a little announcement. I work with LoomCube and I really love working with those people. They're just a great organization. And they hit me up with an email yesterday that they're doing a summer site-wide 21% off sale and shot me an affiliate link to that. Woody's going to throw it in the comments. If anybody wants a LoomCube panel or a LoomCube, I love their LoomCube 2s and their Panel Pros, and they're cool that you can turn them down really low to do night photography and light painting, or use them like I've got one on me right now, and you can control them from your phone. They're great. So check that out. It's a good sale. It's only through Monday. All right. So shall we jump in and start looking at some images?
That's a good idea.
Sound like a plan? All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I'm gonna sort of shut things down so you get a nice big screen view of what I'm sharing, and I'm gonna go ahead and share. There we go.
Hang on 1 second, Hudson.
You got it.
A couple people are saying the audio and video is out of sync. Is that in the chat?
Oh,
Hang
you know
on 1
what?
second.
Hang on, I can fix that. Give me 1 second. That's probably on my end because I think. Give me 1 second. I'll bet you that probably solves things. I forgot to flip over to my mic running through the camera. That probably looks better to folks, hopefully. At any rate.
Now, yep. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, good. Sorry, my bad. Thanks for letting me know about that. There's always just, too many things going at the same time when we're doing these things. All right, so we're just gonna jump in, start at the top. We've got this really great bridge image by Suhail. I don't want to slaughter the pronunciation, but a really beautiful image. I love the traffic lights flowing through.
The blue is just beautiful.
Blue hour is perfect. I love doing long exposure work in blue hour.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can turn off that, get a little bit bigger view. Maybe even go, there we go. Beautiful, nice image. I like the way that the line flows diagonally through. All the lines are flowing diagonally through and they just take you into that bridge and then your eye roves over the sign. And it's a great message up there. Very, very cool.
Very nice too, getting that sort of walkway on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
It just sort of takes you into that one, you got that row of lights that just sort of work its way down to the edge of the frame. It's just really well composed.
And a nice lens that's doing really nice little stars against the point sources. It's great. Another nice one here. You know, the rainbow is just crazy there. I love these kinds of pure long exposures, Fred. You know, the pilings going into the distance, that line is really nice. I'd say I almost wanted a little bit wider. What do you think, Rick?
Yeah, I would say I'd like it wider too. Be lovely to have those posts in the front almost coming out of the water if at all possible.
And a little more room around the clouds potentially too.
Yeah,
and
but it's a
in
nice,
whichever
nice shot.
Really nice shot. And whichever software you're working in, you might go into the color settings and just grab the yellow settings and pull them a little towards orange with hue, just to get that kind of little bit of mustardy out of the clouds. That's a real easy fix. Just move that slider towards the redder spectrum than the yellow spectrum for orange. This one's just dreamy and lovely, Perry. The clouds are beautiful. I had an evening that didn't go very well in Patagonia. David and Kem were there with me, and who are here in the meeting. And it just, you know, we were going to do this sunset shot of the mountains over the lake at Lago Pijo, and it was this kind of night where the sunset kind of fizzled, but there were these interesting clouds. And I remember I slowed it down to like a 2-minute exposure and got this kind of just dreamy look with the reflections. The one thing I'd say here, and it might be that you're editing on a really bright monitor, it might be that you just need to turn your luminance down as you're editing a little bit, but the shadows are blocking up in here. You know, on my kind of calibrated monitor, I can't really see much shadow definition in this foreground forest against the mountains. And I think you could pull more shadow detail in the foreground without overdoing it, just a little more. What do you think, Rick?
I would agree with that. It feels dark to me.
But it's lovely. I mean, the composition is so great. I think it's an easy slider pull with shadows, and maybe turn your screen brightness down a touch
would make a gorgeous print on some of these newer Baryta papers that I've been playing
with the deep blacks. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Alex, this is a spot I know really well. I've spent a bunch of time down in here in Mount Rainier National Park. It's just kind of instantly recognizable. I think this is the Nisqually River, and you know, it's not a terrifically long exposure. It looks like it's slowed down to maybe like a 1/4 second or 1/8 of a second.
Yeah.
But you get a little feel of that flow coming through. Personally, I'd love it just a little wider, maybe a little more sky. It's got some interesting texture in the sky.
Yeah, I'd go a little bit longer too on the exposure.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's sort of in that it's not quite 125th of a second, which is not something I really love. But you know, even if it were just a second, you know, just to get a little bit more smoothness in the water would be great.
Well, and sometimes with these raging rivers, a half a second is a great speed to do. So half a second or 30 seconds, you know, it's kind of somewhere between a second and 30, but not that. I love the really, really long or the down to about a second. I totally concur on that one. This is a lovely reflection.
This is one of my favorite shots this month, but it's almost a little too dead center for me. I almost want to have more water and less sky. You know, just take that plane in the center and just like tilt it up, so there's only a little bit of sky, and you get just a little bit more gradient down below. I mean, it's a lovely image as is. It just feels so dead center to me.
Yeah, I would move the trees up to about here and have that gradient playing out in the foreground reflection. It's lovely though.
Nice and sharp too.
Mm-hmm. Carl, it's the Muddy River.
Yeah.
You know, it's another one of these exposures where it's maybe like an 1/8 of a second, and it'd be interesting to see it just a smidge longer. But you know, it's a nice time to be out photographing on those overcast days where you can see all the details and the shadows, and the exposure's really even. It's nicely exposed. I like the framing.
Yeah, Carl did a great job on the framing here. I mean, the greens all the way around, and how he just sort of got that one branch that's sticking out over the falls in the right place. You know, that's just really well done. Really well done.
Yeah, sometimes something I'll do is selectively, use a local adjustment and turn the saturation down and just paint that brush into the water when it's brown. It's an interesting, this documents the fact there's a ton of sediment running through the river, but if you want to tone that brown back, just taking a local adjustment brush, whether you're in Lightroom, whether you're in OM1, whether you're in Luminar, whichever software you're using, and just go in and just brush saturation out of the water. And you'd be surprised. I have a photo that I just love of these 3 marmots like lazing beside their snow burrow. And, there is just a ton of dirt from their burrow and marmot poop and whatever strewn all through the snow around them. And I just went in with local adjustment and brushed all the saturation out of the snow around them. And it just looks like there's a little bit of grayness, like the snow is melting. And all of a sudden it's not this poop brown all around them. And it really makes a difference.
You can also, with those types of shots, you can use range masks and Lightroom or On1. I think Luminar has them too. Just sort of select that and just work to tone it slightly.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
There's multiple ways of doing it. This is
Another
really
beautiful.
a magnificent Milky Way frame up of Half Dome. It's magnificent. I just say that first and foremost, and then we'll do our little quibbling here. The only thing I would say is I think that the foreground and Half Dome are just beautifully lit and just the right exposure, even in this contrast line between them and the stars. I think that the surrounding ridge, is just a little bit over brightened. I would go in, I don't know. This looks like it's probably a couple of shots composited. I don't know if we have the details about this in front of us, but Michael, I would just go in on the layer with the foreground and just paint a little darkness back in, just darken the shadows.
Yeah,
in the background.
It actually would be nice almost as a silhouette, to be honest with you.
Yeah, agreed.
So close to black, with just a hint of some of that.
Just a hint of some of these. Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful shot, and I love. I mean, it's well composited. It really is.
It is. And the city lights in the back, the light pollution works to just silhouette those ridges more. And, some of this green stuff is just atmospheric. It's like the electromagnetic spectrum. You get that a ton. I would probably pull the magenta saturation back a little bit personally, but that's something that you just work through as you're doing Milky Way. But it's really lovely. The composition's wonderful. Daniel, I really like this one too. The simplicity of it, that kind of negative space, that one planet or star shining through. The only thing I would say oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I've got a couple of shots like this that I've shot on the Columbia, and they're wonderful. Sort of these, early evening atmospherics with just beautiful lights.
It's almost abstract. It's like these shapes just taking you to that bright signal point out at the tip.
Interesting. It's interesting too, because if you look at it from a classical, is this a great image perspective, you go, well, no, it's unbalanced. It sort of goes off into this nothingness that takes you nowhere. But it's actually beautifully composed. It's beautifully composed.
Yeah, it breaks a number of rules that really work in this situation, and I love that. I think it's great to experiment and find those compositions that break all the rules and work really, really well. The one thing I would consider if reshooting this, if you get another hazy day like this or hazy evening, would be an even longer exposure. Maybe throw down some neutral density or add a little aperture, just to take the little bit of ripples and things that are going on in the water, take it for a couple minutes even, just smooth everything. It's beautiful though. It's a tiny nitpick. John, another Neowise image. We haven't seen a Neowise image for a while, and I like this one. It's fun. It almost looks like it's shooting that cloud out of exhaust. But the reflection of the bridge down low, if I move out, it's just lovely. Neat shot. I like the black and white toning for it too. David, crazy image. You know, Rick and I looked at this and we were talking about the images yesterday, and I was like, is this a long exposure? And it is. You can see, it's like I like these exposures for ocean scenes where you can still feel a hint of the wave and the swell, but it's all in motion and sort of smooth. Could be like a second, I'm going to guess maybe 2 seconds at the most. Lovely shot. Just
It's
really,
just
really
beautiful.
nice.
The color is great. The sharpness is great. I mean, it's just,
And there's going to be a few images in here where we critique sharpness, and I'll just say that this doesn't happen accidentally. It's hard work, as most of us who do a lot of landscape work with wide angles know. You've got to be careful because it's so easy to have this just be soft, where it's really close to your camera with a wide angle, or it's sharp and it starts to get soft right here and it's soft to the horizon. So, wide angles have the ability, if you stop down to f11, to have everything from 8 inches, 10 inches in front of you all the way to infinity in focus. But you got to be careful. You can't just, you got to get focused a third of the way into the scene and check it and make sure that it all is indeed in focus. And that little image on the back won't tell you. You need to zoom in and check it, and adjust and get that hyperfocal distance where it's reaching as close to you as you need and all the way to infinity, or do focus stacking. There's so much available to us now that didn't used to be. It's amazing. So Matthew, I'm gonna give an honest statement that I did star swirls back in the days where we couldn't do pinpoint stars, and I've kind of moved away from it most of the time now, because I'm always after that pinpoint star in the Milky Way and capturing that mystery of space as it exists out there, because we can now. But this is an awesome star swirl. Star swirls, they literally they were so amazing when I was a young photographer, decades ago. It was like, wow, Art Wolf was doing them, and then they've gotten a little blasé. But I'd say that the thing that most of them are missing is a subject beyond the star swirl. And this is awesome. This is a great subject in the foreground, lit really well with the right color light. You had some blue hour that's in the base image that you did the swirl with, which makes it much more interesting than black. And it's just lovely. Really, really nice job. In a place that I love too. The name Point Reyes, I spent a lot of time when I was in grad school hiking around Point Reyes, and it's just very, very cool. Nice image. I've thought about doing something like this with the sailing stones in Death Valley and haven't gotten around to it yet. But this is really, really cool. You just feel time here. That old ship's perfect for a foreground subject. Nice execution. So what you thought was going to be a nasty critique turned into a raving applause. So
yeah, I think that the thing about star swirls is, lots of people want to do them because they're fun to do. Yeah. But most of the time they don't really have a subject other than the, hey, look, I did a star swirl. And it takes work to figure out, how to do them well and then do them in a scene where they add value and don't just say, oh, hey, there's star swirl there. So,
Matthew, I'm going to add to it, just looking at it once again as we talk about it, that this goes in my top 10 star swirl images I've seen. And that includes some really cool ones that I love of Art Wolf's, like in Namibia. It's just really well thought out. It's like you did this with a lot of intention, and it's wonderful.
Our buddy Bill says if you're interested in star swirl images, check out Travis Nowitzki's star swirl images on Lake Superior shoreline.
If anybody wants to, you can hit me up. I built an action in Photoshop to automate the process. You can run it at a bridge on hundreds of images, and it'll just build it for you while you're getting coffee. So it's old, but I'm sure it still works. That was a long time ago. I'd have to dust it off. Pat, this is a fun one. I don't think it's necessarily a long exposure, but we're not going to dock you for that.
That's because it's got a Porsche in the scene.
It does have a Porsche in it. Darren and I are happy about that.
He's over on YouTube and he says, sorry, I posted. I realized afterwards that you were looking for long exposure.
Yeah, well, it's a cool shot. It's a great travel shot, and it's nice to see travel photography. I'm off to New York for really a family trip this weekend, and it just feels crazy to think about getting on a plane with the kiddos and going out to eat in the city. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm
Nice,
jealous.
nice shot here. I love the intentional leaving of this bit of the bridge's architecture, the arch. It's really nice. And the woman taking the photograph and the guy in the Porsche taking the photograph really make it. I don't know, there's
Yep.
some rule of three thing going on here that just really works. It's fun. Another Milky Way shot. This is Ken. I like the shadow detail in here. I think you could even probably pull it a little bit more. And the Milky Way, there's something going on where it's just a little soft up in here. I don't know what lens you're using, or if you're using a tracker, maybe just a little off in the alignment. Could potentially, if it's a really long track and not a super wide angle, maybe that could cause the corner to just blur a little bit from motion. But it's beautiful and sharp in the middle here.
Yeah.
Nice job. And if it's composited, you did a fine job hitting the lines in there. You know, one thing I've been doing, I'm really into the compositing, capturing the Milky Way with the tracker, capturing the foreground without, and then compositing. And for the foreground, I mean long exposures with noise reduction, where you're talking 4 or 5 minutes, and then 4 or 5 minutes for noise reduction to get rid of the hot pixels because they're everywhere. And then you can run that foreground image through one of the new kind of, raw pre-filters. I wouldn't ditch your original file, but just the foreground image, if you run through DxO Pure Raw or Topaz Denoise, or it's soon to be OM1's No Noise AI, which I'm finding I'm quite pleasantly surprised with. It's working quite well for being still in beta. Then the foreground you can really get more detail and sharpness and less noise in that foreground. And then for the stars, if you're using a tracker, you don't need it at all. You shoot it at 400 ISO and just do a little. I find it tends to cause problems, those denoise programs with the stars, but not with the foregrounds. So just a little tip in there. This one's fun. I love this spot, Rob. This is a place that we always take our workshops in Moab. We'll be back there in October in Canyonlands and along the Green River there. And it looks like the biggest Bigfoot on earth just stepped into the ground right there, the way that's punched out. It's so cool. Putting the Milky Way over, it's a cool idea. It's super interesting.
Ken says, this is, sorry. I got the wrong one.
Oh, wrong one. Okay.
Yep.
I don't know. I might let the whole thing be just a touch darker, the sky in particular, but
yeah.
With just backing off the shadow slider a little bit and letting the space in between the stars and the Milky Way just be a little darker. It's tough out there, when it's as bright as this. It looks like there might be a little moon interference going on at the same time as the Milky Way here.
Yeah, I mean, I think compositional standpoint, I'd like to either see more of that on the left or none of it on the left.
I agree. It does kind of, between its shadow and itself, it kind of pulls you to the left because it's this darker than anything else in the scene piece. So maybe shifting along the ridge to find a point where you can just have the footprint out there. There's a lot of ridge out there. Here's Harris. Rick and I were perched in 50-mile-an-hour winds atop Steptoe Butte in the Palouse, and we were kind of monitoring our long exposure WhatsApp feed that's still going from the long exposure project. And Harris was posting his eclipsed moon images. You had some atmospherics that interfered with seeing the eclipse, but I love what you captured here. The reflection is awesome.
This is
really
cool. A phenomenal image. And when you think that Harris literally started taking long exposures in February.
When we did the project.
I mean, he's just like, he's growing so much.
No doubt.
Color in this, the horizon, the traffic lights on the bridge. I mean, it's beautiful. It's just plain beautiful.
I have to say, it's just been a joy to watch Harris grow and continue sharing with that group of people. And it's going to be really fun to be out in the field with you, Harris, when we get out doing the workshops this fall. And here we have another star swirl, another star swirl by Ron. I think the forest is interesting as the foreground. I want the tent to be a more foundational element in this one.
Well, this is kind of what we were talking about, right? And that last image that we liked. The tent almost feels like an afterthought, and yet to me, I'd almost want it as big in the frame as the star swirls are,
or as the boat was, and the Point Reyes boat was.
Yeah. I mean, just
nice, big.
Get more in, more of that in there, and have the star swirls as sort of the background to that.
This is one where I'd turn the Loom Cube panel, and you've got the Bluetooth controller, and I'd be right by the tent and just turn it warm on the bottom of the floor of the tent to just put a glow inside the tent. You could adjust it to get the exposure right for the stars, and then let this thing run. The other thing I would say, Ron, is that when you go through, before you run whatever you're doing for the star swirl, I think you started here, you had like a little bit, and then there's a gap when you started the other one. I would ditch those ones that are like the points and just run the one that was continuous. And the other thing is, look through all your images for any planes that are coming through, and just zap those. You can go through with a brush and just brush them out of the individual images where you see planes. You have to kind of run through them all looking for them, and then assemble the star swirl. And that way you won't get the little dot Morse code thing. There's two here, a little blip of one here, and then you really ran it. I would just go with the one that you really ran, and ditch the two planes. See, I have done a few of these in the past. It's just been a long time.
Yep. Yeah, I've done them too. This is a really nifty image. That I love the color, the flow of this one. I mean, it's just beautiful.
I like this bit of curb.
Yeah.
Arcing in here, and then in where you place the point here, just almost to the edge, but not quite. And then the mimicking of that with the traffic flow, and the way that the colors of the lights of the traffic are edited to match the sunset, and then that gray. It's beautiful. It really is.
It's a beautiful shot.
I love it.
Atmospheric.
It tells this. It's a good travel image for the story about Redondo Beach. I will make one comment though. I'd love the same one I'm about to make. Straight. Yeah, that's just what I was going to say.
It's a little bit off kilter, which
and the fact that the sign is a little off kilter, really, you're reading a little high down, and that then you look and you're like, oh yeah, the whole thing just tilted a little bit. Very cool image though. Oh, Para, this is beautiful.
This is another gorgeous. This one, when I saw this one, all I could think of was, I would love to print that image. Oh, would I love to print that image.
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
This one's very saturated, and it works really saturated. I'm often saying back it off, but this one, it's just dreamy, lovely, really, really nice.
Yeah, you should definitely print this one, Para.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
I mean, here's where the rule of thirds just works so well most of the time, and the way the clouds lead you, it's just wonderful. This one is the epitome of sharpness. Bravo, Scott. It's so sharp, and that again doesn't happen by accident. And when you get the focus this perfect, then all of a sudden the long exposure with the blur of the clouds and the blur of the waters only accentuates that. We had, oh gosh, I'm having a little brain lapse on the name in the long exposure project, that beautiful one of Seattle that was like this, from West Seattle, that was just razor sharp pano. That was in the pano project. Just sometimes, I'm so excited I'm going to be there Friday, but I'm going to have the whole family, and I don't know if I'll be up at dawn for this shot, but we'll see.
It's a beautifully composed shot. he
And
thought
the,
about
the
where he
long
wanted to be,
exposure. Yeah.
you know, and yes, the sky cooperated.
Yep.
But it, you know, this was a shot that was planned
Hmm.
and executed well, and it's edited well,
Yep.
composed well. I mean, it's the right exposure time.
Yep.
Really, bravo.
And this is a shot where I think it would be very difficult to do without neutral density. You know, for
Mhm.
people that are interested in long exposure but haven't invested in neutral density yet, stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of filter discussion coming in the weeks ahead from me. I'm making some major shifts in how I do filtration. But long exposure and neutral density, it just lets you use whatever aperture you want and keep your lens at its sharpest settings and really control how much time's flowing through and extend that amount of time. And it's so much easier to use today than it was 5 years ago. We have a question that we should try to get to before we wrap this all up about using neutral density and exposure timing, and we'll touch on that. You know, this one, Steve, another good long exposure. For me, I just like the subject to be a little less centered.
Yeah.
I think I'd like it a little bit
I think
down
it could be down or up in the frame.
Yeah, either way. Either way.
I love the texture of the water. The black and white
Mhm.
toning I think is probably good for this shot. But it just feels so dead center to me, even though it's an oddly shaped object. It just feels off.
Yeah. Another really nice one, Jayant. I'm going to go with Jayant. I hope I'm not messing that up. I love the sky in this. So 2 comments. I would like to tilt up just a little bit. I don't think we need quite as much, unless you caught one where these rocks are more of a foundational element. They're getting a little buried in the long exposure with the surf right now. But more sky, you know, wider for this just magnificent sky, a little more headroom. And also, you know, what we were talking about earlier about focus. You can see that the focus here, really things don't come into focus till about here. It looks to me as if maybe you focused on the lighthouse, which is out at probably infinity from this lens. And so the sky and the lighthouse and the tower back here, maybe another lighthouse, that's all sharp. But what's close in the foreground is not. And, you know, with a wide angle lens, if you focus that lens at infinity, it's throwing its focus beyond infinity, which is sort of doing you no good, and coming back towards you about the lens is the apparent depth of field in an image comes towards you about 1/3 and goes away from that point of focus about 2/3 of the way into the frame. So that's why they say, you know, focus 1/3 of the way into the scene is the old days of films rule. You focus maybe here on this rock or on this rock. It's about 1/3 of the way into the scene, and hopefully that 2/3 of the apparent plane of focus moving away would put infinity into focus. Well, now with you know the technology that we have, you can either focus on that rock, take a shot, check to see if infinity and the foreground are both in focus by zooming in on your result, or you can zoom into live view if your camera will show you your final aperture and look at it at 100% and see is that sharp and in focus and is that sharp and in focus before you ever shoot. But either way, you should check your final shot for these kinds of landscape shots where you're set up on a tripod doing a long exposure and make sure that foreground to background, you've got everything that you want and focus in focus. It's a little back and forth game. The other thing you can, well, it's tougher with a long exposure like this, but you can also focus stack. But that's a longer topic. This one I just love. Ken, this is just super cool. So there are star swirls, and then there are the long exposure stars as rain images. And with the right foreground, it just feels dreamy to me in the same way that blurred clouds do. A longer lens, stars flowing through like rain, I think is such a cool treatment with an image. And this one's really well done. The foreground light on the scene, the saguaros, it's just really nice job. Bravo. It really gives me a feel for this place at night and these cactuses watching nights go by. It's cool. Cool stuff. Inspirational. This one, Raleigh, it's like three different interesting images to me. I think what's going on there, it feels disrupted by the city lights, this one, and there's not that much you can do about it. You know, the foreground lighting feels like it's a little too blue for a night shoot. It's a little like daylight balanced, and I like to warm up whatever foreground light painting. Sometimes it's a car headlight or something, and that just winds up being pretty daylight balanced, pretty blue. But a little bit warmer light, if you're light painting these toadstools, would benefit the scene. I just think that there's not much you can do about the fact that the city lights in this one are right under the Milky Way, the way it's lined up right now, and it just disrupts the scene. It sort of splits it in half.
Well, you say half. It actually feels like there's three images in here.
Yeah.
You know, there's the foreground, there's the city, and then there's the sky. I think almost what I'd like to see is two pieces. You know.
Yeah. Well, and it's three different lighting sources too. I mean, the Milky Way has got its own kind of lights, and the city's a completely different light, and then there's a kind of a blue light coming in on the foreground. I mean, it's a cool idea, and it's really interesting foreground subject. You know, potentially if you could get really low, you know, here's an idea. You go back out to this location and get really low with a really wide angle and silhouette one of these toadstools up against the Milky Way and kind of block most of the city light. So it's just kind of backlit, like a rim light creating around one of these potentially. And really make one of them your foreground subject. And maybe you throw just a little bit of warm light on it, or just let it be a black silhouette. Get so low that it stands up in the sky and is silhouette. You know, anything that's down below this horizon line won't show at all if you do it that way. And you know, try to put the city lights behind the kind of root of these, if you want to say. This one's an interesting one. And just have it standing like a solitary subject, you know, like a Stonehenge figure up into the sky with a little bit of rim light from that city behind it. That's an interesting idea for that location.
Yeah.
Reno, this is a really, I love these surf shots where the foam is washing back. And for anybody who hasn't done these, the key is let a big wave roll in with lots of the foam, and then take the long exposure as it rolls back out. You can see it's bashing into the next wave here, piling up. And this is probably like a second or 2 seconds. And you'll get that motion of the foam rolling back out. And putting the sea arch here is really, really nice. Love that time of night, shooting with that kind of peachy to blue gradient. This again, I would probably go in Lightroom or On1, whichever one you're using, or whatever software you're using. I would go into the color adjustments a little bit, and I would tone back the saturation on the orange, and I would also move the hue a little towards red from yellow, and take the yellow one and move it a little towards orange from green, because I think you're getting a little bit of that mustardy kind of color that can sometimes happen. And you know, it can happen, but it's nicer to just make that redder usually in your scenes. Beautiful shot though.
Yeah, gorgeous shot.
Really nice long exposure. So, you know, this one, I feel, is this maybe a lens baby? It just has
it has that look of a lens baby in the sense that there's parts of the sky, although the tree in the foreground, it's an interesting image. Yeah.
I feel as if there's a lens baby effect going right about in here, maybe, and because these clouds aren't blurring as much that are down low, and then if there was this much motion in the clouds, you'd think the grasses would be blowing and less sharp. Than it's all just funny. I mean, it's so funny how our eyes instantly go, you know, something's different here. I like it. It's a cool effect. The clouds are beautiful in this. Composition's nice. It just has a funny feel. Like, I'm wondering if it's a long exposure, or if it's more of a blurred, you know, a specialty lens, like a lens baby blur effect. This one's really nice, Adrian. It's and I like how you've got the details in here. So Clashnessie Falls in Scotland. Just the negative space in this is lovely. We see lots and lots of waterfall images, And, this one's a really long exposure, and I tend to like not such really long exposures in waterfalls, but when the flow is low and you get these silky little veils, it's beautiful. Really
Yeah.
nice work.
It is really well done.
Compositionally,
The
just
toning
fabulous.
is gorgeous. Yeah.
Yep.
Nice work, Adrian.
Really, really nice. Al.
Oh,
Al invited me to come with him for the launch at Cocoa Beach. I was visiting my in-laws with the kiddos a couple months ago, and I was like, I'll be on a plane when that's happening. I'm not quite there yet, man. And oh, am I sad I didn't go a day earlier. And we've talked a little bit about this. Al and I actually got out together a couple times while I was down in Florida, and it was so good to see you, man. You rocked this one. I know there was a slight bit of luck involved, and that happens. There's a lot of informed, clever decision making, and being there and being ready. And man, it is so cool.
And a great composition too. I mean, again, you've got this spectacular thing, and yet you feel like you're there. That group of people down in the sand in the front, I mean, they really, really make this shot. I saw a similar shot that was just over water with nothing other than that. And to me, it was a beautiful shot. There was nothing wrong with it. But this one just gives me so much more depth. It gives me a sense of what this was and when it was. And just, it's spectacular, Al.
He had the timing set up and the right exposure for getting that blue hour feel to the landscape. And then he triggered it right before the launch to capture the whole thing. And if you wonder how long an exposure is this, well, look at the stars. They're trailing. This is
he said he shot this with a 14 to 30 f/14. And then it's got to be what? So, Al?
A couple minutes, 3 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's cool. And I think so the jet trail or the rocket trail is being lit by the sun as it goes up because it's so high, and it's above us where the sunlight's hitting it, and then it gets up into space. It's just crazy cool. I love it, man. Beautiful image. And speaking of beautiful images, Anuj, this is a beautiful frame. This is that moment when dead center works, with architecture and gardens and the combination of the two. And I think the way this fountain is in the foreground just rocks. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, the golden reflection is something else.
And this is something I constantly tell people when I see cityscapes and architecture shots like this. That moment in the blue hour, usually it's in the evening when all of a sudden the lights click in and you've got warm incandescent lights with the last rays of the sun reaching around in the blue spectrum, and you've got the blue hour and the lights. Even if it's cloudy, the clouds turn blue at that hour, 45 minutes after sunset. It's and 45 minutes before, but usually the lights aren't as great, but this is just awesome. Great timing. If you wait too long, you get that inky black of space and just a bright, blown out building. This is perfect. Speaking of blue hour, here's Darren's blue hour shot of our own Timbers Stadium at Providence Park, Timbers and Thorns. And the long exposure of the crowd and the crowd motion, man, the only thing I'd say is I think the framing is cool, the storytelling. I almost want longer exposure. Yeah, people just blurred milling around.
Two things. I needed to be out of the stadium earlier, so there's more people milling about. And this is borderline handheld. I'm using a light pole to stabilize me holding it at just over a second.
So you think that excuses you?
No. If I was to go and do it again, that's what I would do.
Yeah, get out there earlier with the tripod. And if you were a little bit earlier, the blue hour would be more intense too. You'd have a little more blue in the sky. And if you get scads of people coming through and maybe a couple cars, but not buses, and set that to just capture all that flow emotion, you've got your test shot here.
Yeah, that's it. You are working during these games, right? I mean,
yeah,
sort of. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we also have to
Super
be
cool.
agreed,
Oh yeah. So Gary, I'm constantly telling people not to photograph waterfalls in the woods in harsh midday light, but you found the exception here because it's not being shadowed by all the trees. This is this open rocky canyon and all the lights bouncing off this stone wall and filling the shadows as if there was a bounce blasting into them. And we've got all the details in the shadows, and this works really well. This is a powerful image. And I think your timing here, the exposure is not too long where it just gets blurred and feels plasticky. You've got the feel of the motion coming through this big raging river. And this is what I tend to find I get between a quarter of a second and a second with waterfalls and streams. And I love it. I love the line coming through. I love that piece of sky up above. I'd love to see an even wider shot of it, maybe a vertical with even more sky.
It does feel like vertical would help
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
Not that it's a bad shot at all.
No, it's beautiful.
This
John,
is a beautiful
look,
one. This is a
it
beautiful
is. There's the reflection line here. There's just this dark negative space and the blur of it, and then just the pattern. I don't know. There's just something about the way that the clouds and the foreground reflection of the forest line up that just really work for me in this. It's beautiful, and
it's a
not
lovely shot.
not overdone in the processing, just right. Love it. Cold day up on the Sound. Olympia. Yeah, we had a couple of them. Matt. So it's interesting. This one, there's this one I kind of went around and around in my head with. There's some things I really like, and there's some things I'd love to see you go back if this is a place that you can easily get back to. I love this foreground rock right here with the vegetation on it and the light on it. And I'd love to see more of that, have that just be a foundational element in this scene. Maybe, you move back to the left a little bit, use a little bit longer lens and fill more of the background frame with this waterfall. And in lighting conditions like this, it just feels like the waterfall is maybe a little overexposed, like we're losing detail in it.
Yep.
And so, to capture this beautiful shadowed detail, I don't think you're out on a super sunny, bright day. I think it's just bright, high overcast, which is a good time to be working the woods. But, check your histogram. If it looks like you're blowing your highlights, bracket, and combine those images and just, put more waterfall with a longer lens with this as your foreground subject. I think it could just be amazing. And the other thing I'd say is that the vignette feels a little heavy up in here. We're losing some detail in the vegetation up in there. It's a cool spot. There's so much to work with here. I'm sure there's a lot of great photographs here. So it's a good place to work over and over. Yeah, this is just Pascal. This is lovely fall image. Great long exposure. My only nitpick might be the white border, but I'm not a big border guy, so take that.
Yeah,
Take that.
I think it's a beautiful shot. The water flows the way that I expect it to. That it's sharp where it needs to be sharp. I love those ferns on the right side, and the color is just lovely. I mean, this doesn't feel like it's overdone at all to me.
No, and this is what we're talking about: overcast day in the woods. There's shadows. It's a little bit directional, but all the details there in those shadows. There's no harshness to it. This is why you work the woods on overcast days, even rainy overcast days.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I love the fence and the color and the light and the time you're capturing this. I either want none of the shoreline on the back or more. And I kind of think what I'd really like is a little bit back, wider angle and more, not to the sky necessarily.
I feel that this shot is hemmed in a little bit too tightly. And it leads me out of the frame more than it leads me into the frame.
And it's a beautiful shot. There's so much right about it. There's so much right. The subject, the foreground subject is great. It's just that your eye gets pulled right to this point here.
Yeah.
get pulled up and trapped in that corner. It just leads me up there. And I think that, there's clearly a ridge up here. And if you just included even that much of it up above, then you bounce back. But right now you get let out and you wonder what else is there. It's like, just
I
too much on the
also would like a little bit more to maybe get a little bit lower.
Oh yeah.
And shoot that fence that way and get a little bit more of that ridge behind it. It's just like I said, I just want more. This is one of those images where you want more, or you just want to be in so tight that all I get is just sort of this massive fence and wire and water and reflection with some mist in the back.
But there's so much, it's so on the edge, get back there. That's beautiful. If it's misty at dawns or sunsets, there's a lot going right here. It looks like a dawn to me. That's when that usually happens. Charlie, I was with you this night, and this is a secret beach. We will be back down here with a workshop come August, not so far away. And I remember that was a cool moon set going on right before we did Milky Way. We had to wait for the light from that moon to get out of our way. Doing some really fun Milky Way work in there. This is a fun shot. Nice long
lovely
exposure.
composition. Yeah.
Yeah. I've always really liked this one. I like the way the water's flowing through and the details and the kelp on the rocks. It's pretty low tide. This is a really wonderful, spectacular location to photograph down on the southern Oregon coast, almost to the northern California border. And Charlie's lucky enough to live down there. So I think that, I don't know if Woody's added it. Oh, wow. This is another cool
David.
one. I was going to say this is David because I've seen him working this area. Is David?
That's
David
beautiful,
unmuted?
David.
This is beautiful, man. You've just
gorgeous.
shown me. I can't wait to get back out there with you. Was this kayak based? Do we know?
No,
No.
this was before kayak.
It's
But
beautiful, man.
In the
Haunting.
wintertime, the lake level goes down, so I was able to walk out to a place that's normally, that tree is normally submerged, I guess about 1.5 feet or 2 feet deeper
This
than
is
it is
South
right
Carolina for everyone that
Yeah.
doesn't know. Beautiful. Now, do you have to worry about water moccasins out there or anything?
Not in the winter.
now. Not in the winter. There's
you
a
got
few-
some things that are dangerous in the water that I'm unaccustomed to there. I feel I'm so intrigued by photographing around South Carolina. We got to do another workshop out by you, David. It's so much fun. But I get into those woods and in those bayous, and I'm like, I am a Northwest boy out of my element here. This is a different environment. It's so interesting. It's cool.
You get the same thing on a golf course in Florida. So.
From a danger perspective,
just not as beautiful a scene to shoot. Yeah,
it's true. This is.
Have you printed this one, David?
I have not.
You should print this.
It's gorgeous. I love the
should
timing
definitely
on
print
it.
this
The
one.
blue hour is just beautiful. Great edit.
Yeah.
Sharp, sharp, sharp. Hank, this one's fun. It feels, gosh, this is one of those ones where I'd love to see you do it at blue hour. It's like I've talked about, where you get that inky blackness when it's in the middle of the night. If you can get there just when they turn on the lights and there's still some blue in the sky, this is a really fun shot. I like the composition. Ooh, another one. Great lines leading out. Oh, Jason. Jason's going to be with us in the Tetons. I'm looking forward to reuniting. We had so much fun in Moab in 2019. It was just a blast. You are continuing with that just great eye. The foregrounds are always amazing and tie in so well with the backgrounds.
I don't think he's here, but I'm imagining, because he is such a master of the panorama, that he's.
I think
this is somehow one of his panoramas, which
I'm sure
makes it even more impressive.
I wonder if he's using a little polarizing. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah. It almost looks like a pano with a little polarizing. That'd be my one thing to say. Make sure when you're doing panos, you pull the polarizer off, because you can polarize just one part of your scene and not another. I don't know. It could just be the light.
Although it could also be the light. I mean, if you look at the way the clouds are. But
it's true.
Jason, we've had Jason on a workshop in Moab a couple of years ago, and he had just started learning panoramas to start doing panoramas in a big way. And some
got a
of the
real eye
panos
for
that
it.
he did were just jaw-dropping.
Jaw-dropping.
He
Jaw-dropping.
has a
That's exactly
he
right.
has a sense of composition and
Mhm.
space that just it just stuns me every time I see his work.
And he's like a ridiculously nice, fun guy. So it'll,
Yes, he is.
everybody that's going on the Tetons trip is gonna get a treat hanging out with him. He's great.
He's over on YouTube and says he did have a polarizer.
That's the one thing, whenever you're doing the panos, pull that thing off. It just looked a little to me like that. And you can't fix it. That's the.
Well, I disagree with that. I don't think that hurts the image too much. I might back off a little on the blues and the water.
Well, I'm not saying it ruins it. It's a beautiful image. It just suddenly leapt, I'm looking for something to critique, and I was like, looks polarized right there. And I'm just saying, I have had images of my own that have been ruined. I'm not saying this is ruined. I'm saying I've done really wide panos back in the early days of doing panos. I mean, I think it was back in film when I was hand putting them together in Photoshop, and I realized, you can't use a polarizer because this part of the image, the sky looks almost white, and this part, it is dark aqua blue, and there's nothing I can do to even it out, and it just looks weird. I need to junk this one and chalk it up to make sure to remember to pull that thing off.
Yeah.
Beautiful work, Jason. I'm glad you're watching, and I can't wait to get back out with you. Hopefully you're not blushing too much. Yuri, very, very cool. Well, these are the first times I'm seeing these. After Charlie's, there's been some added since Rick and I went through the gallery. I
think Yuri's is the last one.
Is it? No, this is
a really nice composition.
It is.
It almost feels like it screams to be horizontal more than vertical to me.
Although I like the negative space at the bottom,
Yeah, I like the negative space too.
If you were doing a stock image that people, the magazine people would love this for room for text down there at the bottom that wouldn't interfere with the image.
Were there still magazines? Yes.
Were there still magazines? True. Yeah. I remember there was a day long ago when I was thinking those kinds of things as I shot, and now it's just all about the image. But I do, for the vertical, I'm a vertical kind of guy. I agree with Rick that maybe the subject here begs for horizontal, just because of the line. But having framed it vertical the way you did, I love where you put the horizon and the clouds and the fall off to black. I think it's lovely. Really nice job. Okay. And that does wrap that up. And we are almost at the end of our hour.
Pretty much out of time. Yeah.
We're pretty much out of time. So we got a couple questions. I remember I'll take one question without even prompting, because there was one that was really apropos of what we're talking about. And it was talking about neutral density. And I'm playing around with these magnetic, large neutral density filters. I've got 6 of them in here. We're going to be talking a lot more about those in the weeks ahead. And the thing that's awesome, there used to be a day when cameras couldn't meter through heavy neutral density. If you put 4 or 6 stops, certainly 10 stops, your camera's meter just went, ugh, it couldn't deal with it. And so, my old advice was to switch your camera's metering mode from being 1/3 of a stop with each click of the wheel to being a stop, and dial in the exposure that you want to take a shot, look at the histogram, and then put the filter on and click it 10 times for 10 negative stops of exposure and shoot. There are apps that you can use, but I find, kind of like hyperfocal distance apps, be careful, double check that they're right, because they're often not perfect. And the truth is that all the filters are a little bit different. Some say they're 10 stops and they're really 11 stops, or they're really 8.5 stops. So you have to be a little careful and watch your histogram. Your histogram is really the guide to whether you got your exposure right or not. The beautiful thing is that all of the cameras that I've shot with,
Can I just ask one question there? Because you threw out a rather big thing, which is like, you're going to go out and buy a 10 stop, and it could be 11 or it could be 8. Have you found that to be the case with this new round of filters you're testing?
Much less. But it depends on what level everyone's buying. I think that, if you're buying Hoya Solus infrared neutral density filters like I've used so much in the past, I'm using Case Wolverine magnetic ones just because of the ease of use and the quality of them and the size and the stackability. or if you're using Nisi, or if you're using the new Lee. You know, there are brands that are just killing it, and their latest filters are so good that you're going to find that they're pretty close. But here's the thing, you know, the latest cameras, whether you're shooting with, you know, just about any brand, the latest cameras meters are so good they'll look right through it, like we look through a pair of dark glasses. And I mean, from the time I got my D850, maybe even the D810, but the D850 for sure, and then all of the Z cameras I've had and all the Sonys that I've shot with, of Ricks, they have no problem metering through 10 stops of neutral density. I would still argue that you should compose and focus before you put it on, because it's easier. And slap the filter on, dial in the exposure, zero your meter out, take a shot, look at the histogram, say, wow, that's really close. Maybe I'll add a little bit, maybe I'll subtract a little bit. You're going to just move that histogram so you're not blowing the highlights, but you're exposing it the way you want and it looks right. It's going to get you so close just using the evaluative metering right through the neutral density filter these days. It's made the process quite simple. So, you know, unless you're going out beyond the metering capabilities of your camera, in which case, you know, again, just use that technique that I talked about. Figure out what the exposure without the filter is, backwards calculate, take 10 stops off using your manual mode and dial it down 10 stops, and then take a test shot and adjust. But it is just so much easier with the modern cameras. And, you know, the stackability, someone asked about whether you could stack neutral density with the case filters. And the answer is absolutely yes. And they're so darn thin. Like I said, I've got 6 filters in here, a UV, a polarizer, a 3, 6, 10 stop neutral density, and a neutral night. And they're all these 112 millimeter for the Nikon 14 to 24, and I've got adapters to go to my other lenses. There's no vignetting issues because they're so big and they're so thin that they don't stick out beyond the lens very far. I actually took some shots with a polarizer of 10 and a 6-stop filter with Rick when we were out on the Columbia River, a couple months ago when we went to Cottonwood Canyon, and had no vignetting at all, and it just looked great. So it's pretty amazing what we can do these days. The filters are getting better and better. And like I said, I'm going to be putting out a bunch of materials about filters and some potential discounts for filters for people. So look ahead the next couple of weeks. What other questions do you have?
Well, we're out of time. We're out of time.
Okay.
All
right.
And so we've got.
We'll recycle the Nikon 6th. Questions.
Yes, I'll recycle the Nikon questions. So July 6th, ask your Nikon questions. You've been dying for this. You've been dying for an all Nikon hour. So we're going to give it to you. Well, there's enough people out there that
tune out.
Yeah. There won't be a Sony one. Sorry, but we'll do a Nikon one. Eventually.
Rick's coming to visit, and he's going to be here live for the July 6th one. And we're going to go out doing some more shooting. We were kind of trading cameras, Z7 II, A1, when we were in the Palouse a couple weeks ago. And I actually want to go to a wildlife refuge and do some kind of some back and forth head-to-head stuff and play around with those 2 cameras a little bit. But the A1's a really nice camera. There's no doubt about it. It's a great
enjoying
camera.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. And the other thing, you know, for those of you that might have missed it at the beginning, my friends at LoomCube are offering 21% off of everything in their store through Monday. So if you want to take advantage of that, there's a link in the chat here on Zoom that went up, and I'm going to put a link in my video on Thursday. So just look for that. It's a pretty good deal. Those things are cool, and they're really nice people. All right, everybody. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank, as usual, Woody had to buzz out to get his daughter to swim class, but we still have Rick, Darren, David. Thanks everybody for tuning in. It's wonderful to see everybody. Stay safe, stay creative, and we'll see everybody on July 6th.
Yeah, and those of you in the States, have a great 4th of July.
Yep. All right, guys. Thanks everybody.
Take care.
And great images, everyone. Thanks for submitting.
Yeah.